NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Every year, thousands of human remains are found in the United States. And in one of every 4 instances, authorities can't identify the body. That's starting to change. I'm Dave Killen, co-host of the Unidentifieds, a new limited series podcast from the Oregonian and Oregon Live. We go deep into several cold cases and explain the science that's helping experts give these long-forgotten people their names back. Look for the Unidentifieds after you've finished listening to this podcast. Subscribe to the Unidentifieds on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Trailblazers have added a new player development vehicle, one that virtually the entire league already had. The G League is coming to the Portland area. They will play at the Chiles Center. Bill Oram, who covered the Lakers back in the day and followed their G League team, is so excited to spend every day during the season at the Chiles Center. I'm just kidding. I'm Aaron Fentress. Welcome to the Sports by Northwest podcast. I am joined by Bill Oram on this first ever Sports by Northwest breaking news edition. This will be a new deal where if something happens in the sports world in Oregon or maybe even nationally that we just want to talk about, we're going to jump on here and just go back and forth and have fun discussing it. Bill, you put out the news this morning, actually, that the G League is coming to Portland. You've been working on this for a while. As someone who has experienced at least monitoring a G League team when you covered the Lakers, just give a quick snapshot as to what this could mean for the franchise.
Well, I think it's a big step forward for the Blazers from a development component and just sort of, fully fleshing out their basketball operations. The G League, formerly the D League, the NBA Development League, started, 20 years ago, and, it has sort of gone through different iterations. And the Blazers have utilized the G League. They had a 1-to-1 affiliation with a team in Boise up until about a decade ago, the Idaho Stampede. And but since then, I think Neil Olshay's philosophy when he was the GM was a little bit more to develop players under the umbrella of the NBA team. That a young player like Anthony Simons would benefit more from being around Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum than being sent off to Reno to play against lesser talent. The flip side of that, though, is NBA teams don't really practice very often, and there aren't minutes for those guys. And so for a player like, Anthony Simons is a good example. He had kind of this 4 or 5 year development arc before he became ready to be one of the main dudes and to be a starter. If he'd been playing, getting tons of run and lots of reps in the G League, particularly a G League team that is right in your backyard. This is not sending a player to Idaho. This is sending them to North Portland. And they're going to practice at the practice facility in Tualatin. Everything is going to mirror the NBA operation. So from coaching style, philosophy, scheme, whoever the G League coach is, that's TBD, is going to be implementing the same system as Chauncey Billups. They're going to practice the same way as the Blazers. So really, it's a microcosm of the bigger team. So if a player gets called up to the NBA, they know how to do things in the Blazers way. And likewise, if the Blazers have a couple first-round picks, they have a second-round pick in this draft. If they end up keeping those players and they say, "Hey, we need you to get some more run. We're going to send you down to the G League team," it's going to feel really like a comfortable transition because it's going to be a facsimile of what they do with the NBA team. So, very much a necessary step. The Blazers were one of the 2 last teams to not have a G League team, along with the Phoenix Suns. And Phoenix actually did have a team, then sold it to Denver, which had previously been the team that didn't have a G League team. So really, the Blazers are kind of alone in terms of how they had viewed and not utilized the G League. So this gets them, this is very much keeping up with the Joneses, but the rest of the NBA was the Joneses in this sense.
So for me, the thing that jumps out the most that you just said, and something that I've always wondered about when, even from afar before I was covering the Blazers in terms of thinking about the team, is running the same system, right? So so this season they sent a few people down to the G League. Well, they're running someone else's stuff or whatever that team's doing, and they don't know the guys they're playing with for a week or two. Whereas, like you said, they'll run the exact same stuff. So Chauncey Billups can say, I'm going to send these two guys down, or Cronin will say it, and then they're going to run the exact same plays and exact same structure and exact same timing and spacing, I should say, et cetera, et cetera. And then they can monitor that and see specifically what they're working. They can tell the coach, hey, make sure you run these types of plays for these guys so we can see them work on these things. And then they can watch them work on them and then know that they'll probably be better when they bring them, if they have to call them back up. They have a better sense or idea of what they can contribute. And like you said, they don't practice. It was so funny to me during the season. And it's so counterintuitive to everything I've ever known about sports to watch a basketball team struggle, say, oh yeah, we're struggling. We lost some of our Christmas. We're backslid. We need to work on some things. And then the next day get a message from the PR staff that there will be no practice the next day.
Right.
Or the next day. And you know what I mean? So it's, that's just the culture of the NBA. So for your veteran guys, for whatever reason they're doing it, whether it's load management or that's just the culture, fine. But for your younger cats, they're losing out. Now it's a fact too that even though they might not have a team practice, there might still be some developmental stuff going on for the younger guys.
But that's totally different. That's totally different. You're talking about you can get 6 guys in the gym, your guys at the end of the bench, and maybe you can run some 3-on-3. That's very different.
Right. That's not the same thing.
Full practice. Absolutely. You're totally
right. And just playing a game. Mm-hmm. That intensity and having to process information in a fast-paced time and apply it, it's just a different animal. So yeah, I think this is good for them. Now, the G League produce a lot of stars like minor league baseball does. Not necessarily because it's a different animal. In baseball, you draft guys, they automatically go to the farm system, they work their way up. In the NBA, the guys you draft first round are going to be on the roster, and some of them are going to be in the rotation. Some of them might be starting and be the faces of your franchise right away. So it's not that kind of component, but you do have opportunity to develop guys who just need a little more seasoning. And you mentioned to me before we started that when you were covering the Lakers, Lonzo Ball went down to the G League for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, all those dudes, right? So, like, when I covered the Lakers, I covered the Lakers for 9 years, and they were in the lottery for, the first 4 or 5 of those. And so they drafted Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, Lonzo Ball. They had lottery picks, and D'Angelo Russell.
Josh Hart, don't forget our boy Josh Hart.
Not the lottery pick, but Josh Hart played in the G League too. And because the way the Lakers utilized it, and the Lakers did something very similar to what the Blazers are trying to do. They ran their G League team out of their practice facility. Now they played games there as well. Their gym converted to like a very small arena. So it wasn't sending them off to play at Cal State Northridge, which is the equivalent of what the Blazers are going to be doing, at least for now. But by having everything run out of the same building, it was a very seamless operation. It all felt very synergized. And so, you could send a player down, and Joe Cronin and I talked about this, and this is all in the story that I wrote today at Oregon Live. But you could send a player down for a practice on a Tuesday, and then recall them, and they can be on your bench for the game that night again in the NBA. Or they could play a development league game on one day, and then they can be with your team the next day. And so it can be as simple as sending a player down just to get a full practice in, but then you bring them back up, and they're primarily with the main club. And so there is not even it's not like a demotion. There was a question on Twitter today of what players in the Blazers' recent history would benefit most from the G League. And I said Anthony Simons for the reasons I mentioned at the top, but I mean Shaedon Sharpe too. I mean Shaedon Sharpe at the beginning of this year when Chauncey was like, I'm going to trial by fire, I'm going to throw him out there. It's possible that Chauncey might have utilized him a little differently at the beginning of the year, or when he was struggling or was kind of ending up in the doghouse a little bit for some of his miscues. Send him down to the G League, not to spend weeks and weeks at a time, but to get a full practice, to get some more real hands-on, one-on-one training, to get more minutes. I mean, what you saw from Shaedon Sharpe at the end of the season, where he had the green light and was able to kind of play through his mistakes, is an opportunity he would have in the G League, at the beginning of the year or earlier. And there's an argument both ways, but it would have been a tool and it would have been an option for Chauncey and Joe in terms of how they wanted to utilize and develop Shaedon Sharpe. Now, I think Shaedon Sharpe going into next year is probably past that. I don't think you're going to see Shaedon in the G League next year. But whoever they draft, short of it being, a top 3 guy, you could send that person down there for a couple practices, a few games, to get, to knock some cobwebs off, whatever it is. It's a really good tool.
Well, they could have had a 3-day stretch where they're off, and on the middle day, when they're not practicing. Shaden goes and plays for the G League team, drops 50, and then comes back and joins the big boys 2 days later and plays 18 minutes. You know what I'm saying? But someone like Trenton Watford could benefit from that last year, especially Jabari Walker this year. Jabari Walker probably would have been the star of that team.
Yeah, it's a great
someone like that would have been perfect. Anthony, his first season for sure. The problem for Anthony, aside from being young and coming out of the academy, was that the two guys playing his position were like really good. So he was never going to start over those guys. But early on, when he wasn't getting a ton of minutes, he could have been rocking the G League team and just destroying it and learning and growing and being better. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities to benefit from that for younger cats. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, what do you think the fan interest is going to be? Because it's cool that the team is going to be in Portland and not somewhere else. Some people were talking about Eugene. I was like, well, I mean, why? I don't just find some place in Portland. I thought maybe Portland State. I didn't even think about UP, but UP makes sense. What kind of interest do you think this team might draw?
I'm curious to see, because the Blazers really want to make this a family type atmosphere. I think they draw some inspiration from the way the Hillsborough Hops do things. So the idea of, family first, this is, and the thing that you have to understand about the G League, it is not a revenue generator. Nobody's getting into this thinking, that they're going to make a few bucks on this. I mean, this is a loss, right? Like this is going to be a loss. It's going to cost more than you're going to make. And the revenue is the development of your players and the fact that in a year, 2 years, 5 years, you're going to suddenly have your own version of an Alex Caruso, a guy who started in the G League, or I listed some other guys. Fred VanVleet was a G League guy, So I mean, or it's a coach, maybe Nick Nurse, it's a guy who used to coach in the G League and then became coach of the year in the NBA. So the whole thing, it's you don't know where the wins are going to come, but you put yourself in a position to have the wins. So anyway, not a moneymaker. So I don't think the Blazers are going to be asking fans to, pay a ton to come to these games. $10 maybe for a ticket, something like that. It's going to be really really affordable. It's at a great venue. Obviously, Chiles Center is a great place to watch a game. It's going to be interesting to see what the fan interest is because generally, the G League is not, does not draw, huge attendance numbers. And especially in a town where there are other options in the winter. There are other basketball options, whether it's UP, PSU, the Blazers. That said, there is such a intense fan interest, and you talked about this before we came on, so I'll be curious to get your thoughts. There's such an intense interest in the minutia of the Blazers, and maybe this is all fan bases, but I feel like Blazer fans especially love the idea of the 12th man, and that the 12th man is is the next, star. And you can go see that guy. You can go see that guy for $10 play at the University of Portland on a Tuesday. Maybe you live up in North Portland and it's close for you. I mean, that's a really good option. So, and I think, if Damian Lillard is going to be at some of these games, maybe, if player X is on assignment with the G League team, you're going to see some of the NBA guys down there. I mean, it's an opportunity to see them. I think it's going to be a good fan experience. The Blazers are putting that first. So I think, there will be fan interest, but it's kind of like minor league baseball where you don't worry as much about the result of the game. And so that's going to affect it as well. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I don't know what to expect here.
I kind of think especially early on, there's going to be a lot of interest, especially if there's a dude down there, right?
Yeah.
As Simon's been playing there when he was younger, at Sharp shows up for a couple games, that place could be packed. Especially if it's a cheap ticket. I just feel like if you have a name on there that the fans like, especially if it's guys who showed out a little bit in the summer, right? You have a guy do well in the summer league, and then he's going to play some G League. I think people might be drawn to that. What did the Hops average? Do you know what their average attendance is?
I don't know. I mean, I think 3,000, 4,000, something like that.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, okay, if they can draw a few thousand a game out in Hillsborough, why couldn't the Blazers be in that realm right there in Portland, especially when, the Hops are putting out players that 95% of the people in the stands have no idea who they are.
Right.
No clue. I mean, there's going to be some future stars coming through there, but people don't know, and people aren't checking to say, this guy went in the third round in this year.
Yeah.
And in the NBA, they're going to know who all these dudes are. Not all of them, but all the ones who were drafted or signed as free agents. The Watfords, Butlers, obviously the Sharps and the Walkers, and then who was the other kid they just had? And that my man they like, Greg Brown the third.
Oh yeah.
So they're gonna know those guys, and then there's gonna be those fans who are like, like you said, who's gonna be the next great something? Who's got potential? And there's always, with sports fans, there's a little bit of a scout in every sports fan. Right? You see a guy like me with Anthony. I was just in love with Anthony. Like, that guy's going to be good. And I spent 4 years arguing about it. So a lot of people do that. And so if they have a chance to go see that guy play, I think they're going to go. So I would be shocked if they didn't. What, it holds 5,000, 6,000? I'm going to say 2,500. I'm going to go 2,500 average.
And I think that's a really good turnout. And I think the Blazers would be thrilled with that. I mean, you want to create a robust environment. You want it to be a fun experience for the players too. So I think that would be a win for everybody if that's the sort of crowd you draw. Now, I mean, if there's not a name player on assignment and, it's a Tuesday and the Reno Bighorns are in town. I don't even think it's the Reno Bighorns anymore, but the Stockton Kings are in town. Like, is that, right. Is that moving the needle? No, but I mean, a lot of this is sort of like procedural. It's a necessary function of of running smart basketball ops. Like, you don't know necessarily where, and I said this before, you don't know where your wins are going to come. You don't know what player is going to hit down the road. But like, that's a tool. And like, one example of this is, and I'm probably going to mess this up, but if you have undrafted rookies, right? You have the tool to sign them to what's called an Exhibit 10 contract, which we're down in the weeds of NBA contracts, but by and large allows you to keep a player on your G League team. And the Blazers had the ability to sign guys to Exhibit 10 contracts, but because they didn't have their own G League team, they couldn't offer a $50,000 bonus that is in place when you send them to your own affiliate G League team. So, and you have up to 6 of those. So, undrafted free agents, your Austin Reeves of the world, or whoever else, guys who are just one tier below signing two-way contracts, but who are your summer league players, your training camp invitees. Those guys had no incentive to sign with the Blazers. So that is 6, not roster slots, but 6 guys you could have sort of team control over that you didn't really have a mechanism to bring into your program or to keep hands on. And so that is the sort of thing that they were losing, and it's very much on the margins. It's very much like, the payoff isn't 1 out of 6. Like, it might be 1 out of 60, but like, that's still the sort of thing that you need to win in the league. Like, you have to be able to hit in the draft. You have to be able to make smart trades, and then you have to get lucky on the margins because you're doing things the right way. And I think this is a step toward the Blazers doing things more the right way.
Yeah, that's 6 opportunities to hit on somebody.
Absolutely.
Right? That's 6 opportunities they didn't have. Now, okay, so break this down real quick, if you will. So we've seen the Blazers, though, dip into the G League to sign guys. So obviously not all guys are, quote-unquote, protected.
Right.
How does that work?
You're asking, yeah. So I mean, it's there's different levels.
Put you on the spot.
There's different levels of team control is the short answer, Yeah. So, but like I mean, rather than answer your question, let me just talk about something else. Look at the situation with Shaq Harrison at the end of the season. Shaq Harrison came in and played really well for the Blazers. He'd been playing for the Lakers affiliate, the South Bay Lakers, and the Blazers were able to sign him, and he was on a 10-day contract that expired at midnight the morning of the Blazers' final regular season game. The Blazers intended to sign him for that last day, but they were not able to sign. They ended up getting kind of a little bit of a switcheroo from the Shaq Harrison camp because the Lakers wanted to sign him for the rest of the season. There's a chance to go, get a playoff share and all that and be part of, a playoff run, even if you're not going to be dressed probably. But if the Blazers had their own G League affiliate, they'd be bringing up their own guys they had their own relationship with, and you're not going to get burned like that, at the last minute. Now, the Shaq Harrison thing's a little different because they weren't going to be able to sign him to an end-of-year contract because it was essentially an injury exemption. So they were really going to sign him for one more day, and then they wouldn't have had his rights be through the summer. They did. Who's the guy they signed? They signed
the center kid for one day.
One of the guys they signed was it Matoma. They signed no. I know who you're talking about. You're talking about Chance
Scott.
They signed one of those young guys to an end-of-year contract, or a multi-year deal. Matoma?
Jonathan
Williams.
Williams. Yeah.
So they signed him to a multi-year contract, which basically just gives them his rights through the summer. He'll be on the summer league team. He'll be in training camp, and then they can make a decision about him then. But you know where he's going to be playing?
Or his contract will be traded. But yeah, go ahead.
You want to know where he's going to be playing next year if his contract isn't traded?
On the G League.
He's going to be on the G League team because they've smartly managed, having some young players, and so that is how I see this working. I have one question for you, Aaron, on this before we get out of here. We talk a lot about ownership at the Blazers, and there's been a lot of talk about how invested Jody Allen is in the Blazers long term. Is Phil Knight going to swoop down from on high and buy the Blazers? I wrote something about Phil today, tangentially related to the Blazers. This is absolutely an investment. The G League team is absolutely an investment. It is not a moneymaker. How much credit do you think we give Jody Allen and kind of the Vulcan suits for finally investing in a G League team? We agree it's overdue, but it's here. I mean, do we view that as Jody committing?
But I can't imagine that Paul wouldn't have done it. It was a Neil thing that they didn't have it. Neil didn't see the value in having the G League. And every time I hear someone say the Blazers don't want to spend this or the Blazers don't want to spend that, I'm like, Paul Allen threw money around like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
When was Paul cheap? And has Jody been cheap the last few years? I mean, what are you saying? That Kevin Durant was going to come to Portland, but Jody Allen didn't want to go deeper in the tax?
Right.
So that's ridiculous. So I don't understand no one's ever explained to me where the purse string tightening has been in the Blazers that has cost them a single victory. Like, I just don't understand that. But regardless, Joe Cronin and his staff went to Jody Allen and said, we need a G League team. And I'm sure they presented why. And obviously she said, okay.
Well, the thing that Joe and Dwayne Hankins both told me was that it took no convincing, that she was bought in immediately. And listen, like, even if you think Jody isn't committed in the long term to the Blazers, like, she has a responsibility to run it somewhat credibly. And so it's like, if your GM is saying, this is what we need to function, and she said no, then you should shut down. You should sell it. Because, like, if you can't do what I would honestly consider to be the bare minimum, then what are we doing? So the right thing was done. You're right that previous management was less didn't see the value in it the way this group does. If
Jody Allen didn't care, if she didn't care, why is she courtside during the tanking process?
Yeah.
Why did she agree to give Damian the extension? I mean, maybe you do it because you're going to trade him, or maybe you just say, I'm not giving that guy 2 more years, $112 million. Trade him now. You strip it down. You don't care. It's just whatever. Yeah. She's not operated like that. And if she was, I would say so. I think there's just some, fans get angry. They have to be angry at someone. It's usually the coach or the owner or the GM. But I just don't see any evidence that she's doing anything that's hurting the franchise.
Well, and also I would say, so obviously they went into the rebuild last year as the luxury tax bill was coming due. But you also don't want to be deep in the luxury tax for a team that isn't going to win. And that team was over committed in the wrong areas. Norman Powell, Robert Covington, that was smart business.
CJ,
now maybe CJ, it was smart business. And one thing I'd say is the Blazers have been too slow on upgrading the arena and the fan experience at Moda Center. Mm-hmm. As far as we know, and Dwayne Hankins has been very open about this, they are efforting to start those improvements this summer. Actually, I'm going to keep calling it the Rose Garden. Sorry, the Moda Center is going to be closed this summer to concerts. They're not going to have those big high revenue concerts coming through the arena because they are doing massive
after
updates.
After Janet.
But because they're doing those improvements kind of in the girding of the seats on the ends, so there's going to be a lot of structural improvements at the arena, and then that's going to lead to in future subsequent years more visible improvements, whether it's the scoreboard, the video screen, the area around the Rose Quarter. That's all underway with an idea of bringing an All-Star game to Portland by 2030, which is something they've talked very openly about. And so to me, those plans are very much in motion, as if Jody Allen is still going to own the team. And who's going to be paying for all that? Barring an update, Jody Allen. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, if somebody comes in and buys the team, great. If it's Phil Knight, great. But I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't really see where, you know, you're paying Dame. You're going to pay Jeremy Grant this summer. You're probably, if the summer goes the way the front office wants it to go, you're going to be deep in the tax again. Hopefully a more balanced roster and a team that you feel better about being in the tax with. But yeah, it's expensive, and there's been no indication that they're not willing to go for it. You know, maybe we'll reevaluate after the summer, but as of now, it seems like everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, you can't criticize an ownership of any team for not wanting to go into a expensive tax for a mediocre to bad team. It doesn't make any sense. You're lighting money on fire. If you light 25, 30, 40, $50 million in tax money on fire and the team's bad, if you do that 4 or 5 years, now you've lit $250 million on fire, and for what? Just to say you look like you want to win. It doesn't make any sense. You want to pocket that money to do things like improvements, or have that money in place later on when you do sign the big contract and bring in the star who's going to help you win, and you go deeper into the tax. You've got that cash in reserve. You didn't light it on fire for a bad team. I mean, that's just basic economics as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, there is one more thing, Aaron Fentress, that we have to talk about. We have to tell the good people that we are, listen, they know they can find us on OregonLive.com. They can find us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Bill Oram. You're on Twitter at Aaron J. Fentress. They can find you on, what else are you on? TikTok? Are you on TikTok?
No, I've avoided TikTok. I'm on Instagram, same name.
Instagram. I'm on Instagram. But now, as of this week, you can find us on Subtext. Well, what is Subtext, you ask? It is an opportunity to engage directly with us through your phone. Aaron and I, starting this up, we're at the very beginning of this effort. We're going to be sending updates, our thoughts, our opinions, some questions. We're going to have questions for you, readers and listeners, about what's happening in the world of sports. All you have to do, it's a $3.99 monthly fee, first 2 weeks free of charge. You can cancel if you're not into it. All you got to do to sign up is send us a text right now at 503-386-0095, 503-386-0095. Let us know that you'd like to start receiving texts. We're texting. I sent one today about the G League, some stripped down thoughts on the new G League team, at least relative to what we've gotten into here on Sports by Northwest. But that is going to be something that's going to be gearing up in the weeks to come. So go ahead and sign up there if you're interested. Like I said, $3.99 a month once you get past your free trial. But that's something we're going to be utilizing every single day going forward. And we look forward to engaging with you there.
Sounds like fun. Who wouldn't want to receive random sports texts from us, Bill?
I mean, I know I smile every time I get a text from you, Aaron.
You smile, right? You like, Fentress,
No, but
all right, awesome, good stuff.
It is another opportunity for us to connect with readers. You know, a lot of times this is very one way. You know, us talking at you or us writing to you. And I know, you know, as a reporter, I always love getting those emails from readers with their thoughts on what I've written. Aaron, I know you do too, at least the ones that aren't offensive. and so this is just another way for us to connect with you guys. So thank you for listening and reading, and hopefully you'll check us out on Subtext as well. What was that number?
All right,
Aaron?
be sure.
I'm gonna say the number again. 503-386-0095. 503-386.
All right, be sure to choose. Wait, say it again.
Hold on, I just closed the tab. 503-386-0095.
All right, great. All right, thanks for listening. Hey, we're going to start doing more of these Sports by Northwest quick hitters like this when news arises. It could be Bill and someone from the Ducks or Beavers, Dashel or Crepia talking, or Bill and me, or me and someone who knows. We'll just fire these off more often. And, of course, Subtext will be involved with the topics that we talk about. Please click the subscribe button. Give us a positive rating, and we'll catch you soon. We got the lottery coming up. We got trade rumors galore. Then we're going to have the draft. Then we're going to have players flying all over the country being interviewed and moved. And it's going to be a crazy summer, and we will bring it all to you right here on the Sports by Northwest podcast, as well as the Blazer Focus podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.